Hello, welcome to the Alone Show. I'm your host, John Alone, and in this episode, we don't have any regulars because, well, depending when you're watching this, and because of you know who and you know what, things got a little complicated on the process. Anyway, as for our guest, he is from Las Vegas in Nevada, and he is a filmmaker. But there's so much more than just that, because, ladies and gentlemen, this is Larry Sims.
How you doing this evening?
Going great.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Anytime. So, how else is life going for you?
Life's good. I'm a 66-year-old filmmaker. My health is excellent, and in addition to being a filmmaker, I've had a business going for quite some time, but I currently have my one film that is in distribution. It's streaming on 27 different streaming services, including Amazon Prime, um, Google Play, Apple iTunes. The name of it is Off the Grid, and if you're looking for it, the thumbnail is of there's a cowboy riding a horse, pulling another horse with an orange sky in the background. It says in script writing above it, Off the Grid. That's my film is out now, and I have one film that's in post-production and two more being filmed at this time.
Wow, that's a lot of films in progress.
Yeah, I stay pretty busy. Then I have another company, a marketing company that I do work for exclusively for one company here in the Las Vegas market, and we distribute products across the United States.
Okay, I like it. Very intriguing. So, what encouraged you to become a filmmaker?
It was purely by accident. My wife and I've been married for 22 years. I have four daughters. Um, I was just sitting at the house one day about 3 years ago, and my wife found an online request for people to be interviewed for a film called Finding Happiness. And so my wife talked me into um, contacting these people, and so I sent them an email. About 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from the director who was doing it, and he said he'd like for me to be in his film as an interviewee. So a couple of weeks after that, he brings the film crew out to my house, and before he got here, I told my wife, I have an idea for a film, and it's an entirely separate story, but I am an expert on off the grid living. That's a different story though. But anyway, they come out to the house and they do the interview, and I tell him about my idea to do a film. He liked it. We had a cup of coffee a couple of days later, and then about 6 weeks, 2 months later, we were at my cabin in Utah. Um, Filming a trailer for what ultimately became the film. It was about a 6 month process to film it, and I just really fell in love with the idea of what I was doing. I was part of the time I was filming. Other times I was writing. One of the big things you do when you're producing a documentary film like the one I was doing is looking for interviewees with relevant subject matter. And before it was over with, I had interviewed 52 people in 4 states: Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and the state of Mississippi. Actually, I was there on a trip, and believe it or not, there are off-grid people in the state of Mississippi, but it's much more prevalent in the western United States. Where water and power is not as readily available. So most of the subject matter did come from in the West where I live, and it caught on. I got some help from my Hollywood buddies who we do projects, doing multiple projects on with right now, and it's just I found a passion. I don't know. I'm not old, but 66 is getting up there. But at the end of life, I found something I'm really passionate about.
Okay, That's great. And out of the movies that you've done or are currently doing right now, which one is your favorite you've enjoyed working on?
Well, and that's I mentioned there was another story. My favorite film is Off the Grid, but I am filming a sequel to Off the Grid, which is uh, obviously called Off the Grid 2. Right now we're filming that, but it all started when I was a kid sitting in front of the television in the 1960s, watching on a black and white TV, Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett. And, I grew up in a small town in Mississippi. And, it's a very flat land area, farm and timberland where I grew up. And I've always liked the mountains, and I fell in love with the mountains as a kid. And as I got older, I went to the mountains the first time when I was probably about 20 years old in Tennessee and Georgia, and I really enjoyed that, and the scenery was beautiful, and I always loved the wildlife and the mountains. And I said one day, I was even telling my dad as a kid, one day I'm going to have a cabin in the mountains somewhere, and I want to be around that sort of thing. But my dad loved the ocean. He always was in love with the ocean. He had a really big fishing boat. We used to go in the Gulf of Mexico fishing as a kid. I wanted to do just the exact opposite. I wanted to be in the mountains. So as I got older, I got into my mid 30s, and I was living in Hermosa Beach, California, and I went to the library one day, and I took some drafting paper and some pencil and a ruler, and I started drawing versions of the cabin that I had in my mind that I wanted to build one day. And so I sit there and I would draw it and I draw it. And I drew pretty much the same thing, probably a half a dozen times with different versions of everything. But that was back in the 1980s. And fast forward to 2005, I finally had gotten to financially successful enough to where I had the money to build a cabin. And so I built my cabin in desert high country of southern Utah in 2005, 2006, and of course it's still there today. And it's an extreme passion of mine. And the next step for me was to make a movie about off the something to do with off the grid living, but off the grid is not about how to build an off the grid cabin. It's about the philosophical beliefs that people have as to why they choose to live off the grid. And I interviewed people from the far left, people from the far right, people who were preppers. I interviewed people who believe that. I interviewed a psychiatrist who has a home in Coal Creek, Nevada. He has multiple homes actually. Who believes in the depopulation of the planet, and he was quite an interesting interview. So I had a variety of different kind of people in the film, and with all different kinds of points of view about why they do it. Some people were uh, just brand new to off the grid, and they were doing it because they were terrified of the crime, particularly it was going on in places like Portland and Oakland and Seattle. Uh, uh, some of the people that I interviewed for the film were real estate brokers, and their phones were ringing off the hook during COVID, particularly people looking for a place to escape the cities with the crime and the COVID, and wanting to buy property. And so a really large cross section of people with different belief systems and reasons for wanting to live off the grid.
Hmm. Okay. Intriguing. Is, and do you have like any other ideas about what movies you potentially want to produce sometime in the future?
Yeah, I do. I have I'm actually filmed a TV pilot back in July. It was another idea I had about all the people. It's called the film. The TV pilot's name is Fabrication Nation. It's in post production right now. We're editing it right now. We anticipate it being ready to go to market in February, March. We're going to start putting it out there, looking for potential people or tier one or tier two networks that might be interested in it. The film is about all the people that make the entertainment industry possible, the carpenters, the welders, the fabricators, the engineers, the design people, powder coating experts, the sign manufacturers. So decided to film the TV pilot. I produced the film, and I did quite a bit of the B-roll filming of the project. But I hired a professional film crew, and we came in for a couple of weeks, and filmed in a variety of locations in Las Vegas. And the idea is that we're going to showcase all the people that make or behind the scenes that make the entertainment industry possible. We're going to do it with a little bit of a twist. The star of the show was a young lady named Tanya Kay. She has more than 100 IMDb credits. We were really pleased with. She was the host of the show and did a great job for us. We were very pleased with it, and that was the TV pilot. But another project that I'm involved with, that I was asked to produce, was a show. It's going to be a documentary, TV kind of documentary about the Kairos prison ministry. It's called The 4 Days of Kairos. We've already started filming that, where people go into the prisons and minister to prisoners. And what's really interesting about Kairos is everywhere that it's been, and it's in 31 states in the U.S. And it everywhere that it goes, the violence in those prisons goes down 20 and 30% as a result of the Kairos prison ministry. So even if even if you're secular in your view, it reduces the Kairos prison ministry does wonderful things for the people that are good. Most of these people, I've actually been into a prison in Poplarville, Mississippi, where most of the people I was there for a 4-day period for the Kairos prison ministry, doing some observation before we film it. And most of the guys that were there, they were in there for life. Most of them were in for murder, or and sometimes worse. Um, and But it reduces crime on the inside of the prison, which reduces the cost to the taxpayer when they're not constantly having to fund or hire more and more guards and build more and more prisons. It's a good thing for the taxpayer. So it doesn't matter if you're religious or you're secular. It's a good thing.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
What happens in real life but rarely gets portrayed in movies?
I'm sorry, I did not understand.
Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, if you would, please. I'm sorry, it kind of broke up just a little bit.
Oh, it's all right. I understand my mic is busty. What happens in real life but rarely gets portrayed in movies?
Uh, wow. That, there's a million people who say this when they get hit with a question they don't know how to answer, but that's a really good question. I I think more and more it might be something to do with what real truth is. I'm a big believer in empirical truth and and it's something that is harder to find. Are people who will actually tell the truth even when it doesn't benefit them. And I don't believe there's enough of that anymore, teaching life's lessons, particularly to young people, where they need to have television and movies that that are great teachers on how to be a more moral and just human being, being willing to do the hard work necessary to be successful in life. Believe me, my life has not been simple. It has not been easy. I had a very tough time growing up. I was dyslexic, and I had, you know, dyslexia held me back for a long time. I finally started getting help that I needed with dyslexia, and I'm a fairly gifted writer today. I write quite a bit of the stuff that I produce now, and I've written books, but it was a long, hard battle for me. But when I was younger, it was depressing to me to not being able to. I always felt like I was a fairly intelligent person. I never, I don't think I'm Einstein, but I was above average in intelligence and in IQ, but I could not read. And one of the byproducts of trying to cope with that is I started drinking at a very early age, and it became unmanageable in my late 30s, and I finally quit drinking when I was 41 years old. And I tell everybody, that everything that's good that's ever happened to me has happened to me since I quit drinking at age 41. And matter of fact, on the just 2 days ago was 25 years that I have been completely alcohol free, haven't had a drop of alcohol in 25 years, and my life has changed and turned around remarkably since I quit drinking. Uh, and just so many people out there struggling with either alcohol or drugs or many other types of addictions. And you just have to put away the old saying is you have to put away childish things at some point in life, and I did. And after that, my life really started coming together. I became, successful in business. I met my wife about 3 years after I quit drinking. We've been married for 22 years. And of course, I have four beautiful daughters, and we have a really great life together.
Okay, that's nice.
Thank you.
What? You're welcome. What is the best pair of shoes you've ever owned?
You know, uh, I used to be a runner when I was a kid, uh, and the shoe that you can still buy the shoe today, and you have to understand that I was buying running shoes 40, 45 years ago. But New Balance 990s was the number on those. Those were the most comfortable shoes that I've ever had. And they would change the shoe up and they call it the 991, the 992. And I don't currently have a pair of them right now. I have some New Balance, but I probably had 10 pairs of those shoes through my life, and I love those shoes. That's an interesting question. I'm not sure where that would come from, but
Yeah,
that's an
neither do
interesting
I.
question.
Yeah, just came out of nowhere. Just like I
Yeah,
always do.
yeah.
If your life was a meal, what kind of meal would it be?
Yeah, my life was a meal. What kind of meal it would be?
Hmm.
Um, well, it would be something without carbohydrates in it. Um, I, we really need to talk about me being an expert on being off the grid living. The other thing I am an expert on is in I'm not what you would call a keto guy. I avoid carbohydrates. I eat 2 meals a day. I fast at least twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week for 36 hours. I'll eat at 5 o'clock on Thursday, and I won't eat again until Saturday at 6 in the morning. I do that a couple of times a week. And so if I had to give you the perfect meal, it would be steak and broccoli. Um, that's and I like a fillet. I like a fattier steak. You need to eat more fat in your diet to be healthier. And most people, a lot of people are listening and say, "What's this guy talking about? Eating fat? Fat's bad for you. Red meat's bad for you." But I had a doctor's appointment today, and my doctor, we were reviewing all my numbers, and I have if you were to take a look at my blood work, and I'm not going to tell you specifics about it, but uh, my A1C, my cholesterol, my triglycerides, um, everything is perfect. It's like I'm 35 years old and I'm 66. But one of the most interesting thing about it was my doctor, who's also a friend of mine who I was talking to today, um, he was looking and said, "Wow," I said, "Are you taking something? Are you taking testosterone or something? Because your testosterone's through the roof." He said, "Yeah, I know it's high." I said, "And that, it's my diet and the exercise I do." He said, "Your testosterone's almost 700." He said, "I got guys 30 and 35 years old coming in here with testosterone levels of 200, 250, and they're doing testosterone replacement therapy because of getting up. Well, I can tell. I can tell. I'll just tell everybody that's listening. The reason for that is you're eating too many you're eating carbohydrates, and carbohydrates will kill your testosterone because of the glucose in your blood and because of insulin spiking. You stop you reduce your glucose level in your blood, and your insulin spikes, and your cholesterol will your testosterone will come back. So steak and broccoli is is it for me.
Okay, that's interesting. What if you could live anywhere in the world? Where would it be?
I'm torn through from a couple of places. I've been to 47 U.S. states and 17 countries around the world. But if I could live anywhere I wanted to, I've been going to Catalina Island forever. And who knows, I may eventually live at Catalina. I haven't made that commitment. Probably the only reason why I wouldn't move to Catalina and is because of high taxes in California. I enjoy, you know, zero state income tax in the state of Nevada. And then my property in Utah I love Utah, but I would love to live at Catalina. I've done quite a bit of backpacking on Catalina, and I just like it because it's a small population, and it's I've been to Hawaii, but I just love Catalina. I just love the small town feel of it.
Okay, that's actually a good choice. I would also love to live there eventually.
Yeah.
What music do you put on when you get pumped, like excited or energetic?
Uh, uh, Guns N' Roses. You know, everybody. I'm 66. You got to understand, Guns N' Roses and Van Halen, Loverboy. Those were those were always some bands that I was very fond of. But if I'm gonna, but my favorite music is Gordon Lightfoot. I've been listening to Gordon Lightfoot for 45 years. I love his music. It's folk music. He's Canadian. I've actually seen him in concert one time here in Vegas about 20 years ago. And that's really my favorite music. But, if I want to get pumped up, you know, Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, that's a very good choice. What was the scariest movie you've seen?
The scariest movie I've ever seen was when I was a kid. I was either 16 or 17, and it was The Exorcist. That really terrified me. It terrified a lot of people from my generation. Up until that time, those kind of movies just didn't exist. I mean, it was a much um, uh, more tame world in the movie theater up until the time of Exorcist. Exorcist was is pretty small potatoes now in that world, but excuse me, is
Okay,
pretty small potatoes compared to some of the horror films that come out now. But it was very terrifying to me.
okay, that's cool. What could you give a 40-minute presentation on with absolutely no preparation?
I could talk to you about off the grid living for 40 minutes straight and just keep going on and on and on. I could probably talk to you about the benefits of fasting and excuse me, benefits of fasting and uh, ketogenic diet. I might be able to stretch it out that long, but I wouldn't have any problem at all with off the grid living and the stories I could tell.
Fabulous. What's something you tried really hard to like, but you just didn't or couldn't?
Country.
Like country music?
Um, what country have I really tried to like? Are you talking about a far?
No,
Like
sorry. Well, what I was trying to say is, what's something you tried really hard to like, but you just couldn't?
I just rap. I don't like rap. It's not my thing.
Fair
I
enough.
I'm sorry.
I said fair enough.
Yep.
So, do you enjoy eating spicy food?
Yeah, occasionally I do. I like jalapeno peppers, and I like Mexican food. um, That's about as far as I'll go though. Is jalapeno. I know there's stuff that's hotter than that, but sometimes I can just eat them raw. They're I like them.
Cool, cool. What recent news story have you found most interesting?
There's a news story about that I just saw it, and a lot of the archaeologists around the world, maybe I've missed it because I've had my head buried in my work for the last 2 or 3 years. I think this came out in the last couple of years, but there's quite a bit of research about ancient ancient cultures and ancient pyramids that predate the Mexican pyramids and the Giza pyramids and that are up to 16,000 years old that have been found in places like Java, and it's really really fascinating. And there's quite a few um, historians and world archaeologists who are really really upset by all this, and I'm just fascinated by the fact that uh, they're um, they're trying to claim that it's not real, uh, or that it's not as old as they say it is. But there's quite a bit of evidence that's mounting from what I've been able to read about here recently and see. There was one documentary that was out about this, that we were a much more sophisticated culture going much further back than most of us have been led to believe. And over the last 100 years of all the research, we're supposed to be about 4,500, 5,000 years that we've came away from being a hunt and gather society. But there's evidence now from what they're finding that there's been established cities and civilizations going back 15, 16,000 years. And I find that fascinating.
Okay, that's cool. What is the worst tasting thing you have ever eaten?
Oh, um, I was at a party one time, and they were serving food, and it was like meat, and I didn't know what it was, but it was after everybody got through eating it, they told everybody what it was, and it was cow intestines or something, and it was, and I mean I was trying to be polite, uh, but it was really really pretty hideous. I choked down a little of it, but I thought it was pretty rude to invite us to a party and don't tell us what they're feeding us before they fed it to us. I'm sure there's sure a reason why I don't remember these people's name, because that's the last time I ever saw them. But it was horrible. I just couldn't. It's not my thing.
Okay, okay. What is the one thing you can't live without?
Are you talking about emotionally or physically or?
Anything in general?
Um, I don't think there's anything that you can't live without, but it would be very difficult for me not to have my family. I'm very close to my four daughters and my wife, and but from time to time you lose people. I lost my father. He died in March of 2001. My mother died 5 years before that. Um, it's um, um, it's very difficult to lose people. I pets and all and everything, but I think you can grow to you can move on after losing something, but it's very difficult to live without people and even your pets. I've had pets I'm very close to.
Yeah, absolutely. If someone wrote a book about you, what do you think its title would be?
That's a good. Yeah, I hate using that saying, but that's a good question. I've never thought about it. I've actually written an autobiography about myself, but I've decided not to publish it because some of the stuff is so sensitive in the book. But I'll tell you the name of that book. It was called Man Trap, and there was an entirely different reason other than it being my autobiography. The reason it was named that. But I if I were trying to be funny, there's a movie that I'm very fond of that Paul Newman was called The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, or maybe The Life and Times of Larry Sims. I've had I have had a very interesting life. I have survived against numerous odds. I had some terrible things happen to me, Charles, that are unspeakable that I don't even talk about it, publicly. But you can use your imagination. Things that happened to me when I was very small. I survived all that and moved on. I've lived all over the U.S. I grew up in Mississippi. I lived in Florida, New York, North Carolina. Um, lived in California for 5 years. I lived in Arizona for a couple of years, and I've been living in Nevada for the last 32 years. I've been all over the place, and I had to do things that I just to survive in terms of jobs that were I just always felt like were way I shouldn't have been having to do those kind of jobs. And of course, over time, I developed skills, and by the time I got in my 40s, I started having the kind of jobs that I've been doing for the last 2 to 3 decades, which is I do quite a bit of marketing and sales for people in addition to making film, and that's pretty much it. I that kind of tells you what you want to know right there.
Okay, fabulous. And that was all we have for this episode. It was great having you here, Larry, talking about your work as a filmmaker, your previous and upcoming projects, and a lot of other things. It's been fabulous.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Anytime. And until next time, stay tuned for more.